Last week we explored the differences between several religions by looking at what they offer and how to get to what they all lead to, which falls under the category of heaven, enlightenment, liberation, or paradise. And we can safely conclude from last week's episode that if there is at least one difference between these religions, then they cannot all be the same. So today we're going to discuss and look into whether all the religions could be true. In order to do this, we have to look at an idiom and the other one is a parable. The idiom says all road leads to Rome, which is basically saying that all these religions are just different roads leading to the same place. However, we can debunk this by just looking at the two destinations of different religions, heaven and nirvana. Heaven is a place of celebration, of happiness, of joy, of singing, action, and things is happening in heaven. However, when you go to a Buddhist and you ask nirvana, what is a nirvana? They're going to tell you nirvana is a place of quietude, place of freedom, a place of nothingness, basically. And it's like the difference between a church during Thanksgiving and a library. The other one is the parable of the blind man and the elephant. Basically, this parable goes like this. There are six blind men who came across an elephant and tried to conceptualize what the elephant is like by touching it. Each blind man feels a different part of the elephant's body, but only one part, such as the tusk or the side. They then describe this elephant based on their limited experience, and the descriptions are different. What this is trying to say is that these blind men are representatives of the several religions, and this parable is basically saying that all religions are just touching a different part of reality or truth, and that they don't have all the truth, they just have some of the truth. However, there's a big problem with this picture. The person that is telling the story assumes that they can see the old elephant. They assume that they are not blindfolded, and they can say, well, we took off our blindfold or we started seeing, and that's why we can see that it's a full elephant. At least there are six religions here in the very least, and this person cannot claim to know everything. The religions are similar in a tiny aspect, in that they have a generally similar moral code. However, they are different in almost every other aspect. All religions cannot be true, because either one of them is true or they are all false. And the one we're going to try to prove is true today, to the best of our ability, is Christianity. How do we know that Christianity is true? Usually, when you look all over the internet, you see that they go through the cosmological, ontological, teleological argument for the truth of God and the Christianity. But I think because this is armchair theology, we're going to do a lot less work in order to figure it out. We're going to only look at two arguments for the truth of God and Christianity. We're going to look at the cosmological evidence and the evidence of the resurrection. Well, cosmology is found from the word cosmos, which means universe, or everything that exists. The universe consists of space, time, and matter, and the universe started to exist. This is made clear in one of my very favorite arguments, the Kalam cosmological argument. The Kalam cosmological argument states that whatever begins to exist has a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. Conclusion, therefore, the universe has a cause. Before we go further, let me give you a quick analogy. If I represented everything that is in the universe, space, time, and matter, then it follows from there that whatever created me, which is my parents, you can't find it by looking at me. You can't find it by dissecting me. You can't find it by probing me. If I authored a book, if I wrote a book, and you try to find the author of the book by looking at the book, especially if the first page have been turned off, you can't know who wrote the book by looking at the book. If there's no name of the author there, you can read every single letter in that book and never find it. It's just like trying to look for William Shakespeare in Romeo and Juliet, or looking for him in Hamlet. He's not there. You can't find it. You can tell that it's the one that wrote it by looking at the grammar, the poetry, the pace, the tempo. You can tell if you are familiar with other Shakespeare's work. But other than that, you can never see Shakespeare. You can't find Shakespeare by looking at Romeo and Juliet. The same is applicable for the universe. Whatever caused the universe is not a part of the universe. So it has to be spaceless, timeless, and immaterial. and powerful enough to cause the universe. And that is what we classically defined as God. Because God is the spaceless, timeless, immaterial, powerful creator of the universe. And now, if God is powerful enough to create a universe, then resurrecting a dead person is basically not very, very difficult for him. The second evidence is the evidence of the resurrection. The old Christian religion rests on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. If Jesus didn't resurrect, then there is no Christianity. In order to look at the evidence for resurrection, we are going to do what we call the minimal facts theory, made popular by Gary Habermas and several other scholars. Minimal facts is basically we're going to look at four different facts that almost everybody, secular, atheist, Christian, non-Christian, agree to about the historical Jesus. And this is what I call Dear Jesus. DEAR, which is an acronym for the death, the empty tomb, the appearances, and the reports. The facts are that Jesus died, his tomb was empty, he appeared to the disciples, and there are reports about it. There are people who say that, well, something else happened, and there are four basic theories that try to explain these four different facts, because these four are facts of history. It's an historically known fact and is widely accepted that Jesus died through Roman crucifixion. It is also widely accepted that his tomb was empty. It is also widely accepted that the disciples, they were convinced that they have seen the risen Jesus, and also there are reports about it. The four explanations that people try to give, I call them the lash, because Jesus was given 39 lashes. The L stands for the legendary hypothesis. The A stands for the almost dead or the swoon theory. The S stands for the stolen body, and the H stands for hallucination theory. Now, the legendary theory says all of it is just basically stories that people told. We can see that this is not something that was later made up, because the very first disciples of Jesus believed that he rose from the dead. That doesn't explain the facts that we know. The other theory is the almost dead or the swoon theory, which said that maybe Jesus didn't really die, he just fainted and then later he rose up for the dead. That is not even possible, because Romans were professional executioners. They knew exactly how to kill people, especially people who were crucified. And if they did not even kill Jesus the right way, they will be the one that will be killed instead. So they took their jobs very seriously. The other explanation that disciples are stolen the body. But this is countered by two main things that we know. We know that the disciples ran away when Jesus was crucified. Especially the guys, the ones who would have been able to roll away the stone and steal the body, because it was the women who actually found the empty tomb at first. If I stole something and I was about to be killed, I would say, hey, I stole it, I made it all up. And these people died for what they believe to be true. So, which tells us that they didn't make it up. The H is hallucination theory, which tries to argue the appearance of Jesus, that maybe they just hallucinated it. Well, hallucinations are like dreams, and we can't share dreams. I can't come to you and say, oh, how do you enjoy that dream I had yesterday? It doesn't work out. We can't share hallucinations. 12 people, 70 people, 500 people can't hallucinate the same thing, and this is all bogus. So we know from the minimum fact theory, dear Jesus, Jesus died. It is the most historically sound thing we know about Jesus. The tomb was empty, and Jesus appeared to all his disciples, and they were sure about it. You can ask me, well, aren't there people today who die for what they believe? Well, there's a difference between knowing and hoping. People who die for what they believe today hope that what they believe is true. But disciples were in such a unique position to know whether Jesus actually died and rose or not. They were there. The R stands for the reports of it. Several reports from people who were not Christians, from Jewish historians like Josephus, from Roman historians like Tacitus. We know that these people reported it that way, and therefore the only theory that explains the four facts we have is the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, if the evidence of the universe beginning points to a beginner of the universe who is powerful enough to start the universe and to get it going, is also powerful enough to raise a dead body. And if Jesus actually rose from the dead, that means Christianity is true. But how do we know this even more certainly? Not up to Cartesian certainty, but more certainly. Jesus himself predicted his death and his resurrection. So we know that there's a God that created the universe. We know that Jesus said that this God will raise him from the dead. And we know that the best evidence for the facts we have is that Jesus died and resurrected. Why is this important? Because if Jesus did die and rise again, it means that there's hope for you and I. And I'm using this opportunity to ask you and everybody watching out there to just look into this fact. Because the God of the universe, who began the universe at the Big Bang, brought Jesus and raised him from the dead in order to give you and I the everlasting life that only him can give us. And as you consider trusting in Jesus, because he said he's the way, the truth, and the life, and I invite you today to put your trust in the man who has died and come back to life, because he knows what he's talking about. Thank you very much, and God bless you. So today we have talked about how sure we are of the evidence of the existence of God and the resurrection of Jesus. However, several people think we are being proud or being arrogant by saying that we know these things. And they would say, well, the good, the best and polite, that the humble and honest answer would be that I don't know. But is it really an humble and honest answer? Find out next week as we go through the classic I don't know response. God bless you and have a wonderful day. Bye bye.